Welcome to the Fear and Greed Business Interview. I'm Sean Aylmer. Apple has revealed how AI will be integrated into its devices, and investors clearly loved it. In the 24 hours after the tech giant announced its plans for Apple Intelligence, the share price soared 7%. But there's a lot to unpack within the announcement itself, from the new features available on iPhones to the integration of OpenAI's ChatGPT on new devices. And there are big questions over security, with more data to be sent to the cloud for processing instead of being handled on the device itself. Stephen Fennick is one of Australia's top technology journalists and the editor of techguide.com.au. He's in the US at the moment, where he was covering Apple's Worldwide Developer Conference. Stephen, welcome back to Fear and Greed.
Great to be here. Great to see you, Sean.
Now, I've just got to ask before we get into it, what are these conferences like? Like, you hear so much about them. Yeah. Is it just stacks of people in a big auditorium and, you know, you kind of get the appropriate person up the front doing a song and dance? Or how's it work?
Yeah, well, it used to be all the developers coming here to San Jose usually. Mm-hmm. But during COVID, what Apple did was they made it a virtual event. So they basically just played a video, and that was the keynote. Post-COVID, they've continued like that. So it's actually still Tim Cook gets up on stage for the first few minutes, then rolls the video, and all the developers are still watching virtually. They do invite people like myself, the media, some special guests and other people to come here to view it in person, and then to have briefings and interact if there's any product, to see the product. But this year, there was still a huge crowd here watching the keynote live at Apple's headquarters. They're big, at Apple Park, their massive campus. And it was still a huge buzz in the air. A lot of people were keen to hear what they were about to announce.
Okay, so let's go through some of those announcements. What are the big changes coming to iPhones?
Well, the big one is Apple Intelligence, of course. It's their AI. AI, of course, doesn't stand for artificial intelligence. They've put their own spin on it. It's Apple Intelligence.
Of course.
So, this was expected. This is not a surprise. I think everyone was a little bit worried that Apple they were trailing a little bit behind companies like Microsoft, who introduced Copilot almost a year ago. Samsung introduced the Galaxy S24 in January with Galaxy AI. So Apple's silence was deafening because no one really knew what was happening. And it was interesting in the PC world. There are a lot of partnerships. So like the PC manufacturers are partnering with Microsoft and AMD and Qualcomm and Intel, and they're all talking to each other. You look at Apple. Apple works with no one on its own. So it's a closed shop. They make the hardware, they make the software, they make the silicon. So there was none of these conversations going on. It was all happening internally. And I knew that this is probably their most important worldwide developers conference for some time, that if they didn't address AI in a big way, then they'd be in trouble. But as expected, they responded with the announcement, which I think is very positive. I think a lot of customers are going to really appreciate the power of Apple Intelligence. The one downside I can tell you up front is that the fact that on iPhone, for example, you need to have the very latest iPhone 15 Pro to be able to use Apple Intelligence on your device. It needs to have that kind of compute power. So even if you've got an iPhone 15 or an earlier device, you're going to miss out. So I think, and of course the 16, when that's announced in September and released in September, that will naturally support it as well. And the M series of iPads and MacBooks that are going back at least about, I think, 3 years will be compatible with it as well. So I think that's going to be a barrier to entry for some customers, but yet also could be a reason to upgrade to the very latest models.
Okay, so assuming I have the device that's capable of using the Apple Intelligence, the AI, what does it mean for me? How will it change how I use devices?
Well, you got to remember that if you're an Apple customer, you're likely to be in the ecosystem. So you might have an iPhone, you might have an iPad, you might have a MacBook, and so you're in their ecosystem. So I think that the advantage that Apple's got over Microsoft and Samsung, these other companies, is they've got a wider breadth of products that this works along. So Microsoft have got computers, but they don't have phones. Samsung have phones, but don't have computers. So Apple sort of has the wider breadth of products. And so basically it's going to take a device that knows already a lot about us to begin with, All our data is there. All our contacts are on there. And it's really going to elevate our efficiency. It's going to elevate our creativity and just bring to our fingertips all these tasks and functions that would normally take a longer time. It'll sort your mailbox. It'll give you priority notifications. It'll tell you if you're running late for a meeting and know that if there's going to be traffic and book an Uber. And so it's going to give you all those features. So it really does elevate the experience through a device and through a lot of apps that already know us pretty well. It's really taking us to the next level. And I think how Apple has presented it in comparison to other companies, the other companies have had a more broader view of AI and how it's more an efficiency, a business tool. Apple seemed to have taken a more personal approach. It's sort of contextual, really operating at the consumer level to assist. If you want to write an email, rewrite an email, summarize a document, all those features are there as well. And of course, Apple, you did mention in the intro about the security and the privacy. A big pillar of Apple intelligence is also that privacy, which the company prides itself on. They've assured customers that privacy will well and truly be at the heart of Apple intelligence as well.
Stay with me, Stephen. We'll be back in a minute. I'm speaking to tech journalist Stephen Fennick, editor of techguide.com.au. I suppose there's a big push up in privacy, but also security, because one of the big changes is the increase in the amount of data being processed in the cloud instead of on the device itself. Is it something we should be worried about, or we can trust Apple?
Yeah, well, Apple, they've given a gold-plated guarantee. This is going to be their privacy. They've always been a company that has been proud of the privacy that their devices offer. That they've really respect customer privacy. It's really something they've had at the forefront of their mission. And I think that with I mentioned earlier the requirements of the device. The reason for those requirements is so that it can process a lot of the AI on device. So it's not going to involve a lot of data going off your device. For those other examples where it might need a little bit of help with, they've got a partnership with ChatGPT, then with your permission, it'll send your query to ChatGPT, to OpenAI. But again, their assurance is that will also be private. They've gone to the length, too, of creating a personal, secure cloud for their customers that uses like a blockchain type technology to ensure the server is compatible with Apple's policies, with the data not being stored, nothing being used, and it all occurring anonymously. None of the information is used to improve the AI. So once the query is done, data disappears and there's no trace of it. There's nothing stored, nothing used. And that's what they promise, even if it does involve OpenAI. That was part of the deal. So I'm fully expecting Apple to respect that and to give customers that assurance.
You mentioned OpenAI then. Was it a surprise that they did a tie-up with that third party?
No, not at all. I think that OpenAI is probably the go-to platform at the moment, and Microsoft is a massive investor, so they're a leader in the field. But I think you've got to remember, though, Apple Intelligence does a fair bit of the heavy lifting to begin with. So they do have their own that's going to do most of the work, but they wanted to have OpenAI as a backup source, and for maybe customers would prefer to use OpenAI. A lot of them maybe have paid accounts with ChatGPT, so Apple is not going to stand in their way. It's like they've got Google on the iPhone. You can do a Google search. So in this instance, if a customer would prefer or require a greater inquiry that would only be answered through ChatGPT, then they've got that option as well.
Well, we also have a date now for the arrival of Vision Pro virtual reality headsets in Australia, Stephen.
That's right, yeah. Well, they're going to land in Australia. Yeah, July the 12th is the launch date, and you can pre-order from June the 28th at 10 p.m.
Right.
So 10 p.m. if you're jumping on, you can order. Look, this is, and look, I'll tell you up front, it's going to cost you $6,000 to begin with. It's starting at $5,999, so it's not a cheap product. It's quite an investment. It's relative to the price it was in the US. They're not. If you do the conversion, I think it's $3,600 plus tax. So you do the math there, do the conversion. It's roughly about the same price as it would be in the US. It has had early on had a huge response here in the US. There was a lot of talk about people returning them in the Apple have a 14-day return, no questions asked period. I think that Apple says that there were no greater return volumes of the Vision Pro as there would be on an iPhone. They were on record saying that. The media made a big deal about the fact that there were a lot of customers returning the Vision Pro before that 14-day period. But look, I've tried it a couple of times, and you really have to experience this for yourself. But I've tried a lot of headsets, and this is without a doubt the highest quality and nothing less is what you'd expect from Apple. Just an amazing quality experience that, interestingly, was announced at last year's developers conference, appropriately announced at that time because they need developers to get behind it to create apps for the platform, and there's already more than 2,000 apps available for Vision Pro, and they've even announced Vision OS 2. So we're already up to the second version that allows customers to have a virtual monitor, so they can still use their Mac, but their monitor is in the headset. It's obviously great for gaming, viewing content, and all these other apps that you can use. It is they call it a spatial computing. And I've got to say, the first time you put them on, you're going to think, wow, this is amazing. But I think it still needs to have that killer app, that killer application to really sell it. But the downside, of course, is that the barrier to entry for a lot of people is just the price. Not many people are going to be able to afford this, unfortunately. So we'll see how it goes in the Australian market. I think it'll be a bit of a slow burn in Australia, as it was here in the US. There was initial flurry, but then it slowed right down, and it's sort of a steady sale without breaking any records. But yeah, I'm not sure how Australians are going to take that one, whether they're going to shell out $6,000. You'd have to be a huge Apple fan to invest. But look, it is a great experience, though.
Stephen, thank you for talking to Fear and Greed.
Pleasure. Thanks, Sean.
That was tech journalist Stephen Fennick, editor of techguide.com.au. This is the Fear and Greed Business Interview. Join us every morning for the full episode of Fear and Greed, daily business news for people who make their own decisions. I'm Sean Aylmer. Enjoy your day.